Hey everyone, Frank with IceAge Performance. Today we're going to be installing our Elevate spindles on a Gen 5 freeride and going through the steps from start to finish, how to install it, tools you'll need, and the suspension adjustment necessary for the 1-inch taller spindle and the improved geometry change. In the kit is a complete set of spindles. All of our Elevate kits are like this, sold as a complete set with hardware. So, spindles, pre-installed with new bushings as well, and then hardware that replaces some of the existing factory ones. We'll go over that in more detail as we install it. The benefits of the 1-inch taller spindle and the improved geometry change is going to be handling in technical terrain, bar feedback, bump steer, and the higher center of gravity will inspire a bit more confidence and increase control. Commonly with a factory spindle, there's a lot of bar feedback, and the sled has a bit of mind of its own. These, with the 1-inch taller dimension, is going to create more snow clearance, so less drag, higher center of gravity, easier to get on edge, and the improved spindle geometry is going to make it track a lot straighter on side hill in technical terrain and inspire more confidence for the rider to maybe push their limits a bit more or just be more comfortable when riding and have less fatigue. Tools needed for the install process. We have our impact here, of course, torque wrench as well. Wrenches we'll need 19, 15, 13, and 12 millimeter. Sockets, we use a 15 deep well, 19, and a 16. We also have a 15 millimeter adapter for retorquing these new spindles. Since they are a taper fit, we will need to break that taper loose, which we prefer the method of using this specific ball joint popping tool. This is very common at pretty much any auto parts store for 15 or 20 bucks, and just for this one job, it makes it worth it. So highly recommend this piece. It's just a ball joint popping tool. You can also use a hammer to break loose the taper with a block of wood just against the side, and we'll demonstrate how to do that as well. So we'll start breaking down the sled of the stock components and reinstalling the Elevate spindles and walk you through all the steps. So using a sled lift, we have the machine up off the ground. This will be the easiest way to install the new spindles. But we're gonna start with taking the skis off first, using a 16 millimeter socket and 15 wrench. Next up, we'll loosen the nuts that hold the factory spindle on. This is a 19 millimeter, and then we'll do the tie rod. And we're gonna leave these nuts just a little bit loose, not totally off the threads, and we'll show you why we do that. But first, we're gonna take this tie rod off using a 13 and a 15 millimeter wrench. There is a washer on the top part here, so just remove it from the spindle, thread on that nut so nothing falls off, and we'll just set that aside, and we'll repeat these same steps on the opposite side of the sled. Next up, we're gonna use a hammer and just a block of wood to release the taper from the factory spindle. Should just take a light tap. If your sled's maybe a little bit earlier of a model, like a 17 or an 18, sometimes it can get corroded, so it may take a bit more effort, but we're just gonna demonstrate here on the lower using the hammer and wood method, just a nice light tap. And so that released, so that's loose now, and then we'll get the upper with the ball joint popping tool. Part of the reason why we left the nut on the last few threads of the ball joint is so that way we don't damage the threads when we use this pressing tool. Basically, it just goes right like this and pops the ball joint. Makes it, if it's a little more stuck, easier to release. Same thing for this side. We left the nut on the upper and lower. That way the pressing tool has something to bite onto without damaging the threads. So we'll just take this again and get it into position here. So that did the trick. Pop the upper and lower ball joints off. We can now take the nut off here. Again, making sure we keep track of the washer. We'll reuse that factory one there. Same with the lower as well. And this should just slide right off. So now we have both sides off and we'll put the Elevate spindles on. Inside the spindle kit, we'll have new hardware included. So in there is a little bag here which includes Loctite. We'll put just a tiny dab of this on each thread, and then 4 new nuts, which will reuse the factory washers there. But otherwise, everything else will go back together the same. So there's just a closer look at them. Visually, they obviously look much better, but are gonna mainly help the handling performance of the machine and make the rider have a lot more confidence and more fun. We're gonna use just a little bit of the Loctite that we have in the kit and put a dab on each thread. I like to do this before just because there's a little more room. And one on the tie rod as well. And then we can take the spindle, start with the lower, and then drop the upper in. And we'll take the factory washer and the included nut and just get things started finger tight. Same thing for the upper here. Get the tie rod into position as well, making sure that the washer is on the upper part of that tab. We'll repeat this for the opposite side, and then we'll come back through and snug everything up and torque it to spec, and we'll be good to go there. Make sure all the tapers are set properly, and yeah, pretty simple, just getting things bolted back up. We put the sled back on the ground because we were running into an issue where the ball joint was actually spinning inside of the taper. This is very common. What we are gonna do is take that hammer again in the block of wood and just give it a couple taps where it seats that taper and will no longer spin. Take this right on the top of the ball joint and give it a couple light taps. Now we have our ski pivots with the spacers. We like to run these in the middle position, so putting it into the spindle there, one plastic on each side, like so, and then we can reinstall our skis and put a little bit of Loctite on each thread. Everything just needs to be torqued now, so we're gonna go through uppers and lowers and ski and tie rods and just get everything torqued correctly. Upper and lower will be torqued to 75 foot-pounds. Same with the bottom at 75 foot-pounds. One last step for the Elevate spindles is the lower shock bolt. This will need to be turned around, and the 2 aluminum spacers that are on this from the factory will both need to be on this forward-facing side. So just the opposite orientation of the bolt, and then the aluminum spacers facing both forward on this front-facing part. These 2 spacers are on each side of that factory bolt, and again, switching the orientation so it faces this direction. Both of the aluminum spacers are gonna go on the forward-facing mount, and then just a little dab of Loctite, reinstalling the nut, and we'll get this snugged up to 23 foot-pounds. So that wraps up the install process for the Elevate spindles on the Ski-Doo and Lynx snowmobiles. So last thing we have to talk about is suspension adjustment. If you have coils, whether that's factory monotube, factory KYBs, or Fox coil, we recommend a 7/16 increase to the preload adjustment on the front track shock. And if you have floats, like this sled does, we recommend a 10 PSI increase to the front track shock. This is a baseline setting, so depending on your riding style, rider weight with gear, you may have a different preference on the front track shock adjustment and maybe even a limiter strap change. So generally, this baseline covers a lot of different riding styles and rider weight with gear, but if you feel like you want this to be set up exactly for your riding style and what you're looking to achieve, please call us. We're happy to help and point you in the direction of the suspension adjustments that will benefit the spindles the most and be able to weaponize these in the backcountry as much as possible. We're happy to walk you through what suspension tuning does to your sled when you adjust the front ski shocks front track shock all the way to the rear, and explain thoroughly how this will make the sled handle better and make it more fun with the Elevate spindles. So thank you again for watching. This is the full install video for the Elevate on Ski-Doo and Lynx, like I said. So hop on our website, check it out. If you have any questions, give us a call. But thank you again for watching.